Now, the intent, again, is not for us to dialogue about the content of this at this particular moment, because we're going to get into some of these deeper conversations as we progress over the next few months. But it's to put this dashboard in context when we're talking about we're 27% of the way through a work plan that needs to be completed by June 30th of 2020. And it's really right now, I just want to get your reaction to say, are you proud of the work you've done thus far? Pretty good? Yeah? Yay? Nay? All right. And then so when you think about this, I do want to create a sense of urgency for you. What is it? William Cotter? Is it William Cotter, the change management expert, who says one thing that you do in order to facilitate change well is you must create a sense of urgency, right? Another principle is you have to have a guiding coalition. So this will be our guiding coalition, and we need to light a fire underneath you. So today, even though this is done, the intent is to help you to understand that we have a lot of work to do by June 30th. In order to get that work done, I need you to understand that you are required to get the work done. So yes, KConnect is in place to do a lot of the connections, if you will, and some of that backbone facilitation. But in terms of content creation, content generation, in terms of making sure that we understand what it is that this group wants to achieve in order to guide and steer this community, hopefully in a direction that will achieve results, requires your full attention when you are here. Make sense? Requires your intelligence, requires your emotion, your passion, your lived experience, whether homelessness or not, in order to be able to bring this plan to fruition by June 30th of 2020. Are there any questions? Yes, Diana laughed.
No, I'm not.
Yes.
I'm just, that you've created the sense of urgency.
Yes. Do you feel a sense of urgency? All right. But I don't want you to be afraid of it. I want you to be energized by it, okay? Let me come to this side of the room. Are y'all energized by it, or are you afraid of it?
Let's go.
Okay. All right. So with that said, I'm going to be quiet, and I'm going to hand it over to the Hispanic Center and the Urban League. So Joe Jones, Bo Torres, and Santiago are going to come, and they're going to lead us through a fascinating conversation about lived experience, which is going to be part of populating this green bucket on the road. Oh, well, this green bucket on the roadmap so it can ultimately move to orange, which means orange is complete. Yay, we like complete things. And so they're going to talk to you about some of the preliminary plans about what integrating lived experience into the planning process is going to look like. Even while they're coming up, do you know why it's important for this group to integrate lived experience into system level decision making? Anybody? Anybody?
Because it's being created for them. So
Because it's being created for them?
We tend to assume that if our system doesn't work, it's something wrong with the customer that we can fix or require them to fix. Instead of it's something wrong with the system.
Victim blaming versus system problem.
Yeah.
Right.
You ready to say something?
I'll say because if this was Apple and the phones didn't work, people wouldn't buy them. And we should not hold ourselves to a different standard just because this is philanthropy.
Corporate accountability and philanthropy? Really? Woo, novel. Anybody on this side?
I think in the process of creating anything, people have to understand the why.
Understand the why? Yes.
So understanding the why of people who have lived through the experience will help speak to how the process is.
We should label you Simon Sinek Jr., right? The leadership guru, for those of you who don't know. He's always start with the why, start with the why. Anybody over here?
If we haven't walked that journey, we don't know their experience.
Yes.
We need to learn from them.
Yes. Anybody else? Ye-
The model and process to be customer-centric as one of our goals, and so really focusing on that.
Customer centric. Yes, sir.
I sort of think we have an air of arrogance if we think we know what's best for other people
Yes.
without engaging them.
Yes. Yes. I love it. I love it. I love it. I'm just priming the conversation for Joe and Bo and Santiago. And so all of what you said is absolutely right. It's the why. It's not blaming the victim. It's making sure that you have a comprehensive understanding of the problem in order to have a solution. But I also came across some interesting research from Harvard Business Review the other day that I found absolutely fascinating. And I was like, this is a bit of information I've been looking for as it relates to lived experience or just in general for a long time. Neurologically speaking, do you know when you listen to lived experience, you are creating new neural pathways? You are actually rewiring your brain to be able to make a decision that it could not have made apart from hearing that information. And I was like, yes, Eureka! I have discovered it. So now I can prove it scientifically, I can prove it sociologically, I can prove it morally. It is just the right thing to do. So with that said, let's give Joe and Bo and Santiago a warm welcome as they come to us and do their thing.
And just really quick, while they're getting set up, I want to just point one thing out. So you all have this in your folders, the little house graphic, right? So the part that Bo and Joe specifically are going to be talking about are the equity and community engagement piece of it. And later on, we'll be talking about shared measurement.
Good morning. As has been mentioned, my name is Joe Jones. I serve as President and CEO of your Urban League of West Michigan. And I'd like to begin by providing for you some wisdom that comes from our Native brothers and sisters, Native meaning those whose original land that we stand on. It declares, never criticize a man until you've walked a mile in his moccasins. He who is present at a wrongdoing and does not lift a hand to prevent it is as guilty as the wrongdoers. Great Spirit, help me never to judge another until I have walked in his moccasins. This, of course, speaks to the power of empathy and humility. And it's the way in which we at the League and at the Hispanic Center have approached the work of engaging those that we serve. I will tell you that the work of the League is a very personal work. Just look at the current state data from the Common Agenda and Roadmap to get an idea of why the work is so personal. The data is heartbreaking. I would even go so far as to say unconscionable, unacceptable. We've been in this space for over 76 years, the Urban League has. We know how to lean in and are fortunate enough to have successfully established great trust in community, especially as it pertains to housing. And so we bring that lived experience with us. Dignity, respect, and empathy. This is a recipe that works. Our brothers and sisters at the Hispanic Center of Western Michigan and are cut from the same cloth. And so we are excited about this opportunity to be a part of changing the course of housing and security. This is a part of how we plan to do it. We are planning to take AIM for the target audience. AIM being an appreciative inquiry model, which is strengths-based. It's a positive approach. It's based on best practice. The model helps people move toward a shared vision for the future by engaging others in strategic innovation. AIM focuses on identifying what is working well, analyzing why it is working, and then doing more of it. The theory of AIM is that an organization or system will grow in whichever direction that people in it focus their attention. There are 4 stages to AIM. There's discovery, and it asks the question, what gives life? There's dream. It asks the question, what might be? Design. It asks the question, what should be? And destiny. It asks the question, how to empower, learn, and improvise. One ultimate outcome we plan to achieve through various town halls, focus groups, one-on-one interviews, and research is helping the community and those affected by housing insecurity push into the empowerment phase of community engagement. And so it begs the question, how do we get more of those with lived experience at the decision-making tables? How do we get more of them at our tables? This is a co-design process between your Urban League of West Michigan and your Hispanic Center of Western Michigan. It's a tag team approach that we're taking. And so now I'm going to tag my colleague, Lisa Knight, who is going to come forward with a poem. This is direction there, clicker. Yep. Yep.
Good morning, everyone. I'm not Joe Bo or Santiago.
That's right. We're going to change that whole Joe Bo thing, too. That's,
Okay, you all have, I believe in your packets, a poem, and we want to facilitate some discussion, but I wanted to read this. I thought it was powerful and appreciate it being shared with us. It takes a village, and we've all heard that terminology before, but I think this poem really kind of encapsulates what that really means. So, once upon a time, a group of children from a small town went hiking in the woods. While they were playing together, they fell into a deep hole with a little food or water. After a few days, one of the residents from the village heard the children crying and summoned the entire town to come rescue them from the deep hole. Everyone was asked to bring a rope. One by one, the townspeople tried to save the children. First, a minister went to the side of the hole and dropped in a rope. His rope was long enough, but not strong enough to rescue the children. Next, a fireman dropped a rope into the hole. His rope was strong enough, but not long enough to save the children. Then a teacher dropped a rope into the hole. Her rope was long enough, but not strong enough to rescue the children. Next, the mayor dropped a rope. Her rope was strong enough, but not long enough to rescue the children. Next came the politician, the judge, the banker, and coach, followed by the staff of several nonprofit organizations, social workers, outreach workers, support staff, and others. Unfortunately, no one rope was long enough or strong enough to rescue the children. After a while, the children got frustrated and very, very angry. They understood the problem. They knew the answer. They cried out to those good Samaritans, "Will you please, please tie the ropes together so that you can pull us out of this hole?" And so I asked the question, how are we working to tie the ropes together to create solutions that will breed success in our communities? So on the back of that page, I'm going to divide you all up, and I would like to have you have some conversation amongst your table members. So the way we're going to do this is these two tables over here are going to take question number 1. These two tables here are going to do question number 2. These two tables here are going to do question number 3. And these two tables in the back are going to do question 5. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're going to give you about 3 to 5 minutes to begin to have some discussion at your table about your particular question and begin to create some thoughts, ideas, around how you can address your particular question, okay? So we have 1, 2, 3, and 5. Ready? Go. I forgot to give you one direction. We are going to report out a little bit, so if you want to write some things on the sticky notes and put them on your paper that's on your table, you can do so. Okay, I think we're going to wrap it up. If you kind of bring your conversations to a close. Ding, ding, ding. Do I have to sing? Ah, there we go. Not this morning. All right, everybody, can I have your attention? Thank you. I would like to hear a couple of the conversations that went on at your table. Would anybody like to share out? And when I say that, I have this gift of asking people to volunteer or they get voluntold. If you know me, I do that really well. Anybody, please.
So our table had question 3, which is about partnering effectively with people who have lived experience as peers in system-level decision-making. And we began with this idea of having regularity of recruiting people into a professional development atmosphere where it's an integration of different backgrounds and opportunities. So rather than a model that takes kind of what we would consider like the cream of the crop and developing just those individuals, it's a model of pulling people from across the community, across the whole spectrum of backgrounds and experiences, and then bringing that group together to have this learning experience and professional development together. In that whole concept then, it's looking at what is their ability or what is the space in which people can provide that voice in real time and still have the support and the ability or the time to reconcile and to heal from the experiences that they're in that moment. So just kind of figuring out what that balance looks like in terms of time expectations and the healing that needs to take place. And one of the things that could be a method to explore is something that actually Jim and I were just listening to last night, the concept of restorative justice and the healing questions that occur in a restorative healing circle. So having a group who comes together with some regularity to say, what is the harm that's been caused and what are the ways that we can address it together, that we can heal together.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. Anyone else? Section 5. Yep, voluntold.
One of the things I think we talked about was, okay, hear me? Starting with, we often start with the funding sources and resources necessary to address the problem before we listen to those people that we're trying to help, and that's not always that helpful. And so I think having some sensitivity and awareness to their funding and the resources at the beginning to assure that that has to be a part of the capacity that we have rather than follow the money that's available in order to address the problem. We have to have a process for people to participate that's easier for them to be engaged with so that they feel supported, so that they feel capable of participating without having some of the challenges not be respected. So to be heard and respected is very important, and that doesn't always, that's not always the same as what Eureka's doing sometimes when she's got 5 minutes and you've got to do this and do that. I mean, sometimes that takes a long time to develop the trust and respect necessary to go forward as a group. Another area is that we need to be careful. The voices don't always reflect all of the comprehensive problem that we're trying to address. So if we're trying to scale up and address a large, very wide-ranging problem, the people that we're bringing in may not be able to reflect the entire issue. And so how can we be welcoming and respectful, but still seek those folks that really do represent most of the issue that we're trying to deal with?
Absolutely. Thank you. So can I have those pictures? I don't know who's, oh, I guess that would be me, huh?
You got them.
Systems do not break on their own. You have to break them. I think that's some of the work that we're trying to do here today and that you have been doing over this last year. But I wanted to show you some faces of what the homelessness looks like in our community. As we talk about listening to the stories and hearing what people have to say, we have to be sensitive and appreciative of their lived experience, because everyone in this room has a separate lived experience. We may be looking at the same thing the same way, but we are all seeing it very differently. How do I hit play?
Press enter on
Oh. Thank you.
So, Maria, tell me a little bit about your experience with the housing process. What happened to you?
I think that this is not really for people like me. When I'm trying to give a little,
I don't know how to turn the volume up.
I think that
You can do it down here.
income, it should be like more.
Sorry about that. I want you guys to hear what this young lady has to say.
Raja, tell me a little bit about your experience with the housing process.
And I think it's just an obstacle. It's complicated.
What happened to you?
I think that there's not really help for people like me. Well, I sometimes get a little, can't get my words all right. I think that what happened to me was me being on a fixed income, there should be like more help for people like me that can't make a lot of their bills because I'm a single mom. And
So how did you feel with your experience starting with 211?
horrible. They don't do nothing but send you through dead ends. When you call, you gotta go through the court. You go through the court and you don't like immediately speak to someone, especially when you're in a need of a bad crisis. They just send you in circles basically. They'll see you one person, the next person, and they be like, there's still no help in my eyes.
And how did that make you feel?
Kind of makes me feel a little bad about myself and the system.
What do you think about the housing situation in King County?
I think they should do a lot more. Like, as much as money they take to do for the criminal system, they should take for the housing system for the poor individuals like me.
What has the system not provided for you?
Help for housing and help for utility bill help and help for food sometimes.
What would you like to see changed?
I would like to see more people getting help with housing and bills and food wise. Basically a lot of help with people who have children and nobody to help them.
So, all of our ropes, if we can begin to put them together, we just might be able to help Breasia and give her the ability to dream. When you're in a crisis, you do not have the ability to see what your future can be. because you're trying to address things like food, feeding your children, paying your fines, keeping your lights on. This young lady came through the door the other day about to be evicted because she couldn't pay her electric bill. She's on Section 8, but if she goes to court, she now loses her Section 8 because of her light bill. All right? So I want to do one more activity with you all. It's kind of messed me up a little bit. Number 4 on the back of that page, you all have sticky notes at your tables. And I'd like you to read that. And I can just read it over with you. What capacities, resources, or supports will the Housing Stability Alliance, this is our cadence, this is who we are, the Housing Stability Alliance need to best position itself to partner effectively, and I say that word again, effectively with people who have lived experience as peers in a system-level decision-making? And if you can write some of those thoughts down, and then I'd like you to take those and stick them over, if you can get past Ryan, on the sticky board or the whiteboard over there on the far end of the room. And we'll take a few minutes to do that. Again, I'll read that one more time. What capacities, resources, or supports will the Housing Stability Alliance need to best position itself to partner effectively with people who have lived experience as peers in system-level decision-making?
Let it or curtail it depending on how much time we have left. So I figured if we went over during the morning, we can always do that in a short period. You are right. You know what? I never would have thought about that, but you're right.
Wait, how do you quantify it? No, seriously. Oh, wow. How do I not? Wait. So that means this whole thing, no, seriously. So if this is 7, and this is 5 to 10, no, 5 to 10 for each one of these. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. How much would this whole thing cost for real? So that would, this would literally be $20,000. Really? Wow.
So,
But I think that's good information for them to know. No, seriously. As a limiting factor, that's like, okay, here's why it's important. As a framing factor, right? Here's why it's important for us to spend so much time being as close to right as possible. Because it's not just about the same thing. Like, you want to pick the right stuff, but it's also making sure it is the right stuff. And there's a stewardship responsibility. So that's $100,000 price tag. We should know that's $100,000.
and then that's just the bill. And then someone's got to do it. So,
30. No, seriously, like when I think of, I don't know if I don't know if I bring that out. Because you're basing that on our dashboard. I don't know if there aren't smart ways of doing that. Oh, okay, okay. Like,
In a weird spot, and hopefully through relationships, not from like a we can get more of any other point of
like,
our-
it's cheaper. You need to actually, like, yeah. Data access is so different. And there's added cost to that, right? It takes more time for developers to understand what you're imagining and, everybody has dashboards. Yeah. Right? So, I got it. I think there could be efficiencies in price tag around that. I think I get it, so maybe we don't name it, but I think it's important for them to know that there is a cost, and it's not a nominal cost. So that's another sense of urgency on why it's important to narrow that to 3 or do that. It's a condition that I think that's going to be mindful of, something we can do. That would be part of mentioning this around, it would be part of the background experience. Because they would help manage.
When you said that, I was like, people in a not good way. Exactly, probably would have been. People like you would have
Something, yeah, his books are incredibly
I did not know Lisa was presenting, or else I feel like I slighted the woman. I need to make sure. Because no one introduced her. Well, on the thing, it only said Bo and Santiago. Yeah. Yeah, it didn't have Lisa's name on the slide. I was yeah. I can walk around. I'll acknowledge her. Yeah.
So there's a couple of different scenarios. We're very creative. That's good, we're doing annual trash. No. We don't have it, so we have to decide. It's garbage. It's garbage. You talked to DPW, there's some, and they did say that their guidelines are a little different. I think giving different. I know,
I've got experience.
On recycling communication. I saw it like on Facebook. Yeah. Yeah, and then I was like, I wonder if that, yeah.
I was telling Joe, I said, I really hope that
And I'm like, Mike's recycling bins always is my trash. And so, a couple of things is gonna be, I need so much on Good job. Oh, good, Lynn's on it. Lynn's
All right, it is 9:30. So I think that we've had a break and we've gone off the schedule a little bit. So bringing everybody back together in the room.
Turn your mic on.
Turning my mic back on, so I wasn't So to disengage with the Bo and Joe ad notis is my actual name. So I want to go back to a statement that Lisa touched on.
Can't move.
I can't move?
No.
Okay.
I think you're good now.
I like.
Good now?
I'm good?
She's good now.
Okay. So going back to the systems statements. We've really focused on systems during this conversation a lot. It's in our measures, but systems are designed to work and perpetuate themselves. So the systems that we have in place right now are working just fine. Exclusionary systems are functioning as they are. How do we engage the persons that are not in those systems? So, thanks to Eureka's great research, I'm going to share something today that I was not planning on sharing today to make that connection and make myself vulnerable. October 10th of 2016, I arrived in Grand Rapids, Michigan from Detroit. College educated, here to work on the problem of infant mortality, which for the Latino population is the highest in the country here in Michigan. I don't know if everybody knew that. Still below the African American population here in Michigan. So, one of the management companies here in town, whose name I will not say, I had rented an apartment, ready to move in, and the day that I was ready to move in, they told me that my apartment had been rented. Asked the question, well, what happened? Your paperwork was lost. So what am I supposed to do with a U-Haul filled with things? If it weren't for the social network and capacity that I had here in the city, where would I be? Do all of the residents of Kent County have that same network? Rhetorical. Can all of the residents of Kent County navigate in that way? Within 2 hours, I had unpacked all of my things. They were in a garage. I had my clothes for the next morning, and I was ready to go. But how do we engage? Those pictures are persons. They're not data points. They're not touch points. They are persons. Janet Murguia, who is the president and CEO of Unidos US this morning on NPR, stated that the #1 issue nationally for the Latinx population is housing and housing insecurity and availability of that. So it's a national topic that we're engaging in. It's not just local, it's not just county, it's not just West Michigan. So how do we achieve these goals? Over the course of the last year, and to the rope poem that was so well facilitated by Lisa, we have the keys to these problems in this room, right? We have education, we have housing, we have nutrition support, we have data collection, all in this room. But what are we prepared to do? How are we willing to engage with a system that has excluded populations historically? So over the course of the last year, the Hispanic Center of Western Michigan undertook listening sessions, which we had about 300 participants that engaged. Calvin Center for Social Research put together the data. So of those 300 participants, we learned that we knew what we did not know. To know that you know what you know and to know that you do not know what you do not know, that is true knowledge. AIM principles applied in a way that are going to truly engage a population, right? The touch points that we have, most of this room has not experienced what it means to be without a stable home that we have chosen to live in. It took me 3 times to find the apartment that I currently find comfortable in, and at some point I will buy a home in West Michigan. But how can we really engage in this way? So, we're going to focus on 4 questions. What are the gaps in housing in Grand Rapids and Kent County? What has the system not provided for you? And we will provide definitions of that system in a very engaged and authentic, intentional way. What is the feeling that you have when you seek assistance? What has the system done well?
so we can reframe what it is that the system has not done. Sergio Cira Reyes, who's in the room, facilitated great conversations. Brandy Arnold facilitated the conversations. At the end of the sessions, we framed it by utilizing those same principles. So if Kent County's housing issue is a balloon, and that balloon has holes in it, those touch points that have not been addressed, right? Navigation of the system, engagement in the system, voice. If those are the holes that are letting the air out of that balloon, your answers are the patches to that balloon. So what do the residents of the county, what do the Latinx and Black communities know are the answers? So the answers are in the hands of the persons that are experiencing these disparities, not for us. In navigation of systems, the center itself is a manager of a system. We don't know what we don't know. So when a person comes into our center, we have to understand that sometimes the key points are the persons that we have in our agencies and in our different organizations that engage with those persons first. The macro issues, the implicit biases that we see, we understand and we know. Are we addressing, from an AIM perspective, finding an answer, those persons that are engaged at those first touch points? So, Marisol, at our welcome station at the center, if she has implicit bias, how is she treating that first customer as they come in? That first client, that first community person, that community member? At times, and I say this humbly, but at times we rest on implicit bias when we need to really address explicit biases. If we have a system that is created and we have a touch point with a person, with a community client that comes into our doors, and we have not addressed the explicitness of a person that will not allow them to access the system, then we're doing a disservice to the community as a whole. Those 4 questions will be the key. So on March 26th, at the Center for Community Transformation, the Hispanic Center of Western Michigan, and the Urban League of Western Michigan, West Michigan, will be engaging in a town hall. And we hope and we will achieve these 4 things. We will amplify the message of housing insecurity in Kent County by allowing those who have really seen, engaged, and been outside of the system to express their voice. Every person has power, right? What we can do is amplify that power. So when we say empowerment, we're really amplifying the voice of the persons that already have that power. We will inform. What is it that all of these pieces of rope do? From the legal system, to the housing system, to the center, to the Urban League. What is it that we do? How do we inform what we can and what we cannot do? Because there are some things that we cannot do. The center can't build a house right now. At some point we will. But the center can't house you at the center, but how do we connect you to all of these existing structures, right? Utilizing ENTF, utilizing ESC, systems that already exist through the persons that we have that will engage. We will identify, which is key. At each of these spaces, we know that there are persons that want to drive the conversation forward. Those are the content experts. I had an experience with homelessness. I am not a content expert. But we have persons in the community. I've worked with a young man now for the last 3 years in my position at Strong Beginnings and in my position now, who has navigated the system continuously. We met the other day. We sat down. I was like, okay, so where are you at? I'm at Degage. All right, what are you looking for? Do you have a job? Yes, I'm at Steepletown. I'm working on Kitchen Stage. Okay, cool. What else can we do? How else can we navigate the system for you so that you feel secure? But it's maintaining those authentic, real relationships over time so that he feels safe. And he feels comfortable coming to me saying, Torres, let's talk about this. Let's do this. Okay? Then Those persons that we identify through these conversations, the town hall being the first, engaging in the continuous listening sessions, not just focus groups, but listening, true listening sessions to what the persons need, engaging in those 4 questions. Being able to develop a sense of belonging for those persons. So diversity and inclusion can take us to a certain point. Engaging in a sense of belonging for those persons, making sure that the language and definitions that we use, we speak a lot about social determinants of health and the impact of our center on those social determinants. Transportation, housing, education. To a community member, if I say, what do you know about social determinants of health? I don't know. I live them daily. I don't know. So how do we engage in a way that's going to be authentically educating our community so that when we come into a room that is not filled with, higher level executive directors, higher level educators or program persons, half of the room should be content experts who can address those specific issues, who can patch that balloon that is Kent County to really address the issue that we face. The lists and the measures and the way that we want to be perceived have to be real for all members of this community. We cannot exclude any member of this community. So, if we want a welcoming community for the Latinx population, how are we addressing all of the issues from transportation and being able to drive without fear? How do we address issues for the Black community and being able to walk without being stopped to my home? Social determinants are or should be that foundation for the scaffolding that includes housing but not solely housing. It's that kind of framework that we should be engaged in to really address the issue of housing insecurity. And it can be done. So this was one of the sessions that we collected data at. Young people, Black and Latino students from all over the state of Michigan, and we asked them, what do you know about the center? What has the center done incorrectly? What have we not done? How can we address those issues for you? And what are your answers? So we have a model, and we will engage in that model using AIM as the guiding principles for that data collection. We will engage the community, and we will go outside of that to make sure that all voices are heard. Because without that voice, we will not achieve the goals that we want. Again, what are the gaps in housing in Grand Rapids and Kent County? What has the system not provided for you? What is the feeling you have when you seek assistance? And what has the system done well? All right. And now I will go back to Lisa, who will look at some of the different data points that we've collected from the different tables. Oh. So the date of the town hall. What is that?
What's the date of the town hall, and are we invited? And the time.
Okay. March 26th. Center for Community Transformation. 5:30? 6 o'clock. 5:30. To be early is to be on time. To be on time is to be late. To be late is unacceptable. So but yeah, so 6 o'clock we will start off for community. We will go until about 8 o'clock. Center for Community Transformation, thinking about social determinants. Center for Community Transformation.
Which is where?
Which is at the address on Hall in Madison.
On the corner of Cottage Grove and Madison, and the address is.
Yes, yeah.
Joe's looking up the address right
The
now.
address is 1530 Madison, 1530 Madison Avenue Southeast, 1530 Madison Southeast, Center for Community Transformation.
Any questions or any other comments, feedback? All right. Over to Lisa.
I just wanted you to reflect or be able to look back at what your, some of your answers were, and as we begin to put them together.
Nope.
We had a lot in.
Before you go in depth,
Oh,
We lose a little piece of this mic every time it's transferred to someone else. Okay, here we go. So as we reflect back on some of the answers, we're good? Okay, some of the answers that you put up there and we begin to group them. We have a lot going on under capacity. There's a lot in this community under capacity. And when we looked at resources and supports, I then ended up having to move some of the supports back over under the resources. But look at some of the things that was said in there, especially as it pertains to supports. Going to the people is important. Not expecting them to come into our spaces, because now you're creating a whole nother system for them to have to deal with. Dealing with transportation, that was a huge one that shifted over here. Somewhere. It's over here. And then trust. And so being able to engage people in our communities, Black and brown people, we want to make sure that they see the people that look like them, that also have experienced life similar to what they have, to be able to engage with them and begin asking some of these questions, like the young lady on the video, and getting real answers. And some of those answers are not only painful for them, but they're painful for us to hear, because we don't want to hear that we're wrong, right? So living a day in someone else's shoes is important. And then one of the keys, again, is relationship. That young lady that came in the door walked through our doors for the first time last year because she needed to do community service. And during that time she was there, we created a relationship so that I could speak into her life and other people in our organization could speak into her life and give her direction and a sense of hope. And so when this situation happened, she just picked up the phone and called, because she knew that we would listen first. And the last one that I want to point out that I think is really important, advocates, allies, and accomplices in this work. So people that are willing to speak up when they're not at the tables where people are making decisions, accomplices to say, wait, we need to stop. We need to pump our brakes, and we need to make sure that everyone at this table is reflective of the people in the community. And if they're not reflecting the same, then we don't need to go any further with any of the processes that we're doing until we have those voices at the table. We're smarter today than we were yesterday, right? All right, I'm going to turn it over to Santiago.
Oh. There, lost again. All right, we're gonna go into one last activity, so bear with me. I know there's a break after this. We might go a little bit over. But what we're gonna engage in is an empathy map. This is borrowed from the design thinking model, but we talk a lot about systems, the larger framework that people have to navigate. And that sometimes in that talk, we lose sight of who actually is navigating those systems. So for those of you who's ever done an empathy map? Has anybody? A few people. I recently went through this exercise, and I think it's an amazing activity because it really makes you stop in your tracks and think about who's actually navigating these systems. What does it look like for them? So we're gonna go through this process. And that's okay if you don't have lived experience. I think it's still a very valuable experience because it's going to illuminate some of our limitations. If we don't know what it's like for people when they enter the system, what are they thinking? What are they feeling? What do they see? What do they have to say to navigate these systems? Like, that's important for us. I think we've already established that we need to have their voices here. They need to be part of this process, both now and in the future. But have we taken a time to look and think about what it's like for them to navigate our system? And you can utilize the lens that you have. So we're all at different parts of the system. That's fine. Utilize the lens that you have, where you work, what it's like when people navigate the system through your organization or through your relationships that you have. But we're going to take some time here. We're going to do an abbreviated version. We'll take about 5 minutes and have you actually fill out this form. If you don't want to utilize the paper in front of you, use some of those Post-its on that with you, but walk through it. And then we're going to talk at our tables, and then we're going to do some reporting back. So right now, it is 9:49. At 9:55, we're going to come back, and we're going to share a little bit at our tables and then at the larger group. So go ahead and fill out the empathy map. Are there any questions about what you're doing?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're very good.
It's clear in my head.
I know.
So what we're going to do is think about the lived experience user,
Okay.
the client experts, or the people that come to your organizations about housing insecurity. What do they experience? What do they think and see, or what do they think and feel? What do they see? What do they say and do, or what do they hear? So you are stepping into their shoes for a bit, as best as you can. Because we've talked a lot about the systems, like I said, but now we're going to think about what it's like from their perspective. Because we've kind of been in the air a little bit, so we're going to bring it all the way down to their experience. We're not at the macro anymore. So we're going to fill this out, and if you don't know part of that, that is fine. Fill out what you think you can. So we're going to spend about 5 minutes on that, and then we're going to come back and share in groups. All right. You can do it individually or as a group at the table if that's easier for you. So this is an experience for you, though. And that's fine. Like, if you don't have that experience, that's part of the process. So if you want to pair up with somebody, if that's easier. All right. We're going to start coming back together as a large group. So we're going to come back together as a large group here. So I know I didn't give you enough time. I'm just gonna say that up front. You can spend probably the whole hour and a half just on this activity. But I think it's really important for us to acknowledge that this process needs to be done. So we've talked about the end user, the client, the lived experience, the content expert, whatever term we utilize, we've talked about them. But I don't think we've taken the time to actually think about the experience that they go through in a meaningful way. Granted, I've only been here 2 meetings. So if you did that before, great. But I think it's really important. As we talk about systems, breaking and creating, or we talk about policies, or we talk about all the hurdles they have to go through, actually going through it step by step. You know, with my organization, what do people see when they come in? How do they feel? And that could be everything from anxiety to stress to, you know, when you walk into your office, is it like 60 degrees? You know, what are the conditions that we are creating for these people, for the lived experience users? What do they see? Is it welcoming? Is it warm? You know, if we know that they're going through these stressful times, are we creating a welcoming environment for them? We talk about the appreciative inquiry model, AIM. That is from a positive framework, and that's very intentional. We want to amplify, empower the lived experience user. But what are the experiences that we're creating for them? What are they hearing? What are they saying? Do they have to learn a new language to navigate our systems? Do they have to know keywords to get them from step to step? So what conditions are we creating? Because we're all part of the system here. Whether we're from manage to dissolving, it's a spectrum. We're all part of the system. So what are we creating for those who are going through these experiences? So we could have spent probably a half an hour on each of these quadrants, but I encourage you to go back and take the time needed to do that. But that's what we're hopefully going to do in these listening sessions, the town hall, is we're going to gather data and bring it back. We're going to identify people who can be at these tables, but also as people in the system, how are we preparing them to be at these tables? What conversations are we having with our colleagues? So, how are we prepping and paving the way for them? How are we going to be an accomplice in the future? Because we've been here 12 months, now we're here another 6 months. And like Eureka said, this is one chapter. So this is long work that we have to do, but how are we setting up success for the future? So, like I said, I know I didn't give you enough time. The very first time I went through this exercise, they gave me 15 minutes too, and I was like, what are you doing to me? I'm a big context person, so I need a lot of time to unpack things. But it's important as we think about those with lived experience, there's not one picture. They're not a monolith. So we could probably go through this exercise multiple times and still need hours. So that is it for my activity here. Whoop. Whoop. Nope. Where's the thank you page? There we go. I can't read backwards. So thank you. Do you have any questions for all of us here? So I don't know if the team wants to come up. We can kind of share, answer. But yeah. We'll go here, then there. Is that okay?
Tell us, your organizations are constantly asked to do this. What can we do as a community to make this reproducible, scalable, sustainable practice?
Well, yes, that's a good caveat, without exhausting us. I would say that most importantly, I think every organization that's represented here on today needs to recognize the value that this is going to bring. We're fortunate enough to have been asked to participate by way of KConnect, but we see the work as being critical, and it fits into every system in our beloved city, because quite often what we see is that's what's lacking, and I don't think it's necessarily intended. I just think it's something that is not at top of mind. And so our hope with this work is that many of you around the table or who are in this room will begin to maybe look at it as something that's needed in your neck of the woods, because we feel as if we have an obligation. As I mentioned earlier, this is personal, flat out. I mean, it's and once you get into the work and you get to know the folk and you get to watch them as they go down or go through their journey, you want the best for them, but you also are very cognizant of the fact that the terrain is difficult. And so, why not try to position them to where they can come and they can educate various tables so that the system can begin to work better for them. So we're open, and we our hope ultimately is to do more of this, actually. So
ask early. At the beginning of the conversations, right, only being here for a year, but ask early. That way, when we're forming the kind of conceptual maps, the kind of questions when we're engaging with people, like I said, he'll say, okay, how can we, I knew coming in what we as a center and what the Latinx community had been asking for, so to engage in a way that was very authentic, to listen, but what are those questions? How can we form those questions? So being able to sit together as a team and say, okay, what are the actual questions that we're going to ask? How are we going to engage? Who do we want to identify? How are we going to identify those persons? Having the time to do that, the urgency of the moment, this is not going to be something that we're going to be able to do in 6 months, right? It's continuous work. But asking early so that we can have the opportunity to truly engage in a way that's going to be informed as organizations that are going to do this work. We're going to do this work anyway.
I guess just to add on to the end of that, for that statement is organizations being willing to hear truths, right? Because I don't think this hasn't been said. I don't know. I'm new, first day in here. I think it's been said many, many times in multiple different ways, but people just don't want to hear truth, right? They don't want to hear that, oh man, is this what we're doing? Because we all want to feel like we're doing good work. And it's not to say that we necessarily aren't, but it's just not good enough. Oh, I saw hands all over the place.
I could stay with you guys all day and ask you 50 million questions, but a couple of them. How many, I assume some of the stuff you already have, some of this data you already know. People have been coming through your doors. You already know basically the main issues, but are you gonna do multiple town halls? Are we gonna do multiple? Because for me, it's, I have a different lived experience in very poor rural, so everybody's got different lived experiences. For me, it's super important to have all of that captured, because I know you guys live it and breathe it, but all of us don't, and so I can't tell you how important it is to get that and get that, share that. And then when are we gonna get that? Do we know about when? Because I think it's really gonna shape what we're doing.
Yeah, we are looking to do multiple town halls, 2, possibly 3 as a whole. We will also have multiple opportunities to engage in the listening sessions and focus groups. The benefit of having 2 organizations is we have much more capacity. And again, the focus is going to, our target audience is and will remain African American and Latinx children and families. And so, to your point, though, we do have substantive data that speaks to the issue. We can tell you, why folks are experiencing homelessness, what specific part of the county they're experiencing the most homelessness. We got all that. It's because it's what we do every single day. But in terms of when this is going to be in your hands, we've been given a timeline to be complete in about 5 months, 4 or 5 months. So. Those are the marching orders, and that's our plan to be able to have that to you so that you can get the work done.
And just quickly, lastly, I know I want very honest responses. Like, I don't want people to be afraid of, if there's problems that I'm here representing the county, I want to know what those problems are so we can fix them. So I hope that everybody's just very honest, respectfully honest, but where there are problems, we need to fix them.
I can promise you that. I can promise you that. Yes, you will get unadulterated, unfiltered, raw honesty. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
No name calling.
Yeah. Yep. Rochelle. Yes.
Thank you for being here. My question is this about money? So, I hear the young lady who was being videotaped, and she said she was going to be evicted because she couldn't pay an electricity bill, which I assume was like, $100. And my immediate urge is to pull out my wallet and here's $100 so you're not evicted, right? And the comment she made around spend so much money on jails and not on housing, incenses me because it's true. And so, and someone over here wrote something about a stipend. Could this problem be solved by simply giving homeless folks a stipend that meets basic needs?
I'm going to be very specific to a certain sector of the population. So the public charge, which was just allowed as a law federally, speaks to that point. So there's a certain sector of the population right now that is being adversely affected by policy that is non-protective, that deals directly with cash assistance or any sort of assistance. If an undocumented person receives over a certain amount over 36 months, they would never be able to apply for citizenship. So when we're looking at social determinants of health, and we're looking at work and money as part of that, a stipend isn't going to solve that problem. It's accessibility, healthcare, education. It's the combined efforts of the systems. But that's just for one specific portion of the population. And that's at a federal level. So at the county level, advocacy, accomplishment, all of those things have to be engaged in a way that's going to be productive in a protective policy way, not just policy. Policy can be written in a way that will hurt individuals. So when we're looking at it, to that point, throwing money at it will address some things, but systemically, what will we do?
If I could add to that real quick too, this also speaks to the challenges within the system. There is the theory that the system, that the primary responsibility is to provide housing, right? Affordable housing, quality affordable housing. But there's another theory that says in order to maintain that, you need dollars that are non-traditional. We call them diversion dollars, as an example, that actually provides for folks who need to pay a electric bill or to pay first month's rent, or whatever it is, right? And that will allow them to continue. Why? Maybe because they can't pay the electric bill because the alternator went out in their car, right? But the system is set up in such a way to where it doesn't always take those things into account. And so, yeah, resources are a big part of this, but the complexity is so great. And what we find to be helpful is when we hear from those who are experiencing these things firsthand, they give us the response, and quite often, you know, we actually receive it as, it can't be that easy, right? But it is. And so, you know, that's part of the benefit of this exercise of going out and hearing from those who are living it is, you know, we know for a fact that they have the answers. It lies within the indigenous community. It's there. It has been. So I got time for one more question, and I've been told, sure.
You spoke about the financial piece, and I think we have a lot of financial around housing in Kent County, but the focus is not directed towards prevention. If we could have more of that, those dollars go towards prevention, and we can keep these people stably housed where they are. Because when they're uprooted from their families, that's a whole burden on the system that we could probably take care of if we had the funds to do so. Because what happens now in prevention, we do a light touch, a Band-Aid, and that's not working. So the people cycle, our client gets cycled back through the system because they're aware of how it works. So every 6 months, we see the same people coming back, hitting 3 different programs. And I think that needs to be a primary focus going forward.
Yeah. One more question?
I just
for a while. Sorry. Hang on just a minute. So here's what we're going to do, because I think there are a lot of questions, and we want to honor your time. So what I want to do right now is just have you just tell us what your questions are. I'm going to have Deanna write them down. So
Awesome.
Everybody just kind of, Wendy, you had a question. What was your question?
Yeah, I want to consider what the relationships are between those seeking services and those providing services, and I love that concept of you know, what are they feeling when they're coming in and seeking help? And you all are in this work and continue to be in this work year after year after year. But we see in so many nonprofits the burnout and high frequency turnover of people who are providing service because they don't know how to deal with that either. When there are resources that aren't available and they're in the position of having to say no to someone, that creates another set of trauma that needs to be healed. So I want us to consider that.
Gotcha. So the relationship between those seeking services and those providing the services, and then what's the health care or what's kind of like the care strategy for those who are providing the services to prevent burnout? Yes, Sergio.
So I'm concerned with the way we're going about this, and it's traditional, it's the way it's always been done, and it's we get feedback from community, and then as people with power decide what filters up to us, and we attach value to the experiences that people communicated versus allowing them themselves to say, these are the things that we as a community want you to make priority. And so I'm wondering if the engagement team has considered creating a body. This is something I had mentioned in the past, and it's not new. So for the record, I want it to be known that I think it's important to empower residents to be able to negotiate those priorities themselves, as opposed to us continuing to follow a process that we seek their feedback, and that power dynamic exists between them, as opposed to a separate body that would influence us as we create, and is able to say, no, these priorities that this team came up with, these 10 priorities, we think that we want to be able as a community to add 2 of our own priorities as citizens without this body being able to veto those extra 2 priorities.
So it's how do we let residents set their own priorities, and then how do we preserve the priorities that they set?
Yes.
Is that right? Okay. Did you have another question you wanted to add? Were there what was your question?
So I love what you said about the prevention and sort of trying to figure that out, because we were talking a little bit about once you get to homelessness and once you get to the police force, you're already kind of in this category, and so how do we catch people in the yellow? And for me, it was a realization of how do you know when people are in the yellow? Because they may not be reaching out for help, and they may not be reaching out for help until they're like right here. And if they do reach out earlier, is it, you know, you have to wait until you're 14 days from being evicted to really get services? So can you help identify who's in the yellow? Like, how do we identify who's in the yellow?
So it's how do we identify who's in the yellow? And then were you also implicitly asking, and then what would be those strategies to ensure that they don't get to the red?
Yeah.
And what would be the strategies to make sure they don't get to the red? I wasn't trying to put words in your mouth, but I think that's what you were saying. Can I also add a question you asked in the network share meeting that we had, and that's how do people move from red to green?
Yeah,
And then how do people move from green to
How do we
red?
move people up that spectrum in a systematic way?
Yes, in a systematic way. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, Denny.
I'm just thinking that getting this cross-sector engagement in this process and using some of these AIM techniques or whatever to bring in the lived experience, it might be helpful for a lot of organizations and institutions as part of the deliverable out of this process to identify how they get that TA, how they get that support to be able to create a framework within their organization, within the systems they're working in, the different sectors, to do this well. That could be a valuable deliverable coming out of this group, I think. And the second thing I wanted to say is that I've said this over and over again. Sometimes I think we work in this thing, and you know, where are the elected officials and policymakers engaging with folks with lived experience? How do they get, because what I've discovered over my career is that if you can get a legislator in front of someone who's with a lived experience, that helps to influence public policy more than anything I could say. And how do you make that happen? How do we get commitments from the state legislators from Kent County or the region or whatever, or the county, the city? How do we get that to happen so that they actually build it in? You know, they have public hearings and all that kind of stuff, but that's not the same thing.
Yes.
And how do we get them to the point where they look at that? Because I think that while there's a lot of capacity in these systems, there is also a supply problem that's tied to cash and capital.
Yes.
And some of the income support programs that both in terms of allowing people to keep more of their check, you know, with their earned income tax credit versus and getting at more income in people's pockets. So I think without engaging somehow in the public policy arena here in a very deliberate way with lived experience, we can talk. We'll just keep talking.
Got it.
So
okay. So 2 questions I heard for sure. The latter was, how do you have elected officials engage with people with lived experience so that true policy change, positive policy changes, can be be implemented. And then the first question was around how do we ensure that organizations such as these around the table get the technical assistance that they need in order to be able to implement models such as AIM so that they can build their capacity to
And
be
those
able
not
to
around the
hear.
table, too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those not around the table. So maybe collectively in this area can have the technical assistance that they need to build their capacity to be able to hear and engage with people with lived experience. Yes.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
Denny, I couldn't agree more, but immediately I thought we need to come up with a list of those policies. What are the ones that have been enacted that are really harmful or that are creating barriers that need to be amended or changed? What are the ones that we want to see expanded that actually are helpful? Some of them are statutes, as you know, but some of them really is within the departments. So what are some changes we want to see happen at MISHDA so it would be nice if there's an opportunity maybe after we get through some of this work to really look at a legislative priority list and then come together, those of us in this space, and think about how do we really start to drive change. Because I agree, it's frustrating even at the city level when folks come, and Commissioner Jones knows this too, and they want us to do something, and I'm like, I don't have any power over that. In fact, our state has preempted almost everything at the local level for me to do. So we're trying to figure it out, but we have very few opportunities because of where we are right now in the state. So I'm all for that. It's a challenge I'm willing to take on. I'm looking at my colleagues who are also elected in this space.
My target was largely the state legislature.
I'm in.
We'll get Teresa and Neil, but let me do this question first. So did you get, what are the policies? Yep. And then how can we assess them to set priorities or to identify what can be changed?
And then just really quick again, I'm gonna back up here. So what we were probably just talking about was high leverage activities. So if you are interested
We'll make
Take
sure
note.
that in a moment.
Jenny, I think that's a team that.
All right, now I'm in team for you. All right, yes, Teresa and then Neil.
Mine is just a comment, and Mayor, I appreciate your comment, because I think people don't know.
Yeah.
People just don't know, and so how do we educate the community, right? Not just on this issue, but on issues. And we can stop blaming each other. And make assumptions, right, that it's the city of Grand Rapids, or it's a county, right? They don't know.
Yes.
And so how do we educate people to get that message out?
So how do we you got it? Educate people.
How do we create resources to solve the problems we're here to work on from the shared interest with other systems? I'll just give a quick example. I became a landlord involuntarily when my mother went into assisted living. And that cost the city a lot of money because I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
And there's no induction program for new landlords, right, if you did decide to do that. But there could be gains to the housing system from other systemic level activities.
All right. So, wait, say your question again.
How do we mobilize resources from other systems to
There you go.
benefit the center?
Okay. All right, how do we mobilize resources from other systems to benefit this system? Thank you. Yes, Jack.
I just want to expand on that. In a sense, we run the risk of using housing as the focus and defining the individual, whereas the individual really is a holistic set of needs. And so while we still want to focus on what our goal is in terms of housing, we also want to, I'd like to ask, could we also make sure we hear those other issues that are associated, using the poem as the example? Where are the educational issues? Where are the health issues? Where are the mental health and substance issues and other needs that person has, so that when we come around the person focusing on housing, we can create a wraparound service that allows them to get all of what they need to be successful.
How do we create holistic, wraparound services that address the needs of people?
In that vein, and building on what Sergio said, though, my question is, even beyond allowing people with lived experience to set their own, their own priorities, what are we doing to ensure that those with lived experience have decision-making power? So I think that's like, what, as we're creating and as we're trying to create this system, what vehicle are we using to ensure that they will have power, decision-making power?
Yes. Right.
In all of this.
In all of this. Okay, what vehicles are we using to make sure that people with lived experience have decision-making power in all of Can you say it again? All of this. Say it like a black woman.
I don't want to be disobedient, but I just want to address that because we didn't say it, but that was in the plan. That is the next step.
Okay.
So we're not only talking and listening and hearing, but then looking at who those champions are and trying to help raise them up so they can be at the tables with our support. So if I don't know your lingo, I can whisper it in your ear. And if, you know, it feels like they're not being listened to, or they got their super person next to them saying, wait a minute, hold on, let's stop.
All right, sounds good.
Because I need you to listen.
Okay, I just want to make an observation too, that the further up we go towards the green, the more power and control people have, and so that aligns with, if we can catch it earlier, people can have more power over their destiny.
Yes, all right, so yes, all right, okay. So with that, did everybody get all their questions out? Good stuff, I love it, I love it. Give yourself a hand. Give the Urban League and Hispanic Center a hand. Thank you so very much, Bojo, Santiago, and Lisa. I publicly apologize to you. I did not know Lisa was presenting because her name was not on my notes, so it was not an intentional slight. I actually didn't know you were coming up, so just know. So with this said, we're going to take a 10-minute break. Don't worry about your agenda because you have a really good facilitator who's going to make sure you get out here on time. And we're going to still cover what we need to cover. So 10-minute break and then we'll reconvene. But make sure it's 10 minutes, okay?
Say a few words. Thank you, Mark. Eureka, thank you. Thank you. I wasn't on the agenda, and just as I'm listening, you know, I just wanted to say it out loud, and what I want to say, I wrote it down, and I said we are still approaching the problem as us versus them. We're still doing that. There is no them; it's only us. And until we see the issue from a shared lens, we will continue to seek to address it from a paternal perspective. Those of you in the room who said you had experienced a lived experience, would you please stand real quick? Those of you who said you've experienced it, would you please stand? And some folks have left. And if you look around the room, 1/3 of the folks in this room approximately have experienced homelessness. We are them. Suppose those of us who you see standing were not able to successfully navigate the system. We would have lost all of their gifts, talents, and input. These people would not be here. And so it's us. It's not them. And thank you. You may be seated. Thank you. And we have to move past sympathy to empathy. And most of all, we need to recognize that our entire community will benefit from the elimination of homelessness in Kent County. We all benefit, not just the end user. So we must assure that our approach is driven from an asset-based perspective and not a deficit-based perspective, which I think, you know, we still are considering that. Because as we change that perspective from an asset base, it will dramatically change or improve or impact how we approach resolving this. Quick question as I end up. What team in the NBA gets first round draft choice? Which one? The worst. Why do you give the worst team the opportunity to choose the best players? You not only level the playing field, the entire league becomes better. The entire league becomes better as you improve the performance of the lowest, the worst team in the league. That's what we're doing. Everyone here is a beneficiary of the elimination of homelessness, and we need to recognize that. And you know, so I'm just wanted to share. I think we need to just alter our perspective some. We're not helping those people. We're helping ourselves as well. So, thank you.
Go Pelicans.
Can I just say something very quickly just to that point? I think, because we talked talk about humanizing this process and looking at these folks as individuals rather than data points. And I think amazing points you just made. And I'm not trying to put anyone on the spot, but I think maybe at some point, we talk about understanding lived experiences. It might be beneficial to hear the experiences of those in the room who have actually experienced homelessness. Because I think I would imagine that most of you can reach each other as peers. There is some of us have actually experienced some level of homelessness. So.
Go ahead, turn this you home and back to Detroit.
All right, thanks, Eric. Thank you for that. Now I want to turn attention to shared measurement. As I've been the guy that's sort of been taking the house around, we're squarely in the shared measurement area here. At last meeting, there was quite a bit of activity around metrics, and we took a lot of that information back, used it to put a structure around shared measurement, which I'm gonna show give to you guys as a draft to work on as we move forward to a community picture around data that can be a foundation to work from in this work. But first I want to talk to you a little bit about KConnect. So everyone on their table has a piece of paper, a large piece of paper, that is the KConnect work plan. Looks like this, and maybe just grab onto that a second while we go over that. So in this very room, it sounds like, I think I found that out for the first time today, there was a lot of negotiation, discussion about the Cradle to Career Collective Impact Initiative that was going to become KConnect. And part of that decision are what were the important milestones along the path to career that can be identified, that are based in research, and that we can focus our efforts on within the community to make a difference in outcomes for children and families within the community. And in that process, they identified 8 what we call success measures. These are high-level community goals, right? And along that path, they found that kindergarten readiness, that all kids in Kent County need to be ready for kindergarten when they arrive at the doors of the schools, right? That all children need to read by 3rd grade, right? Because that is the important point in a student's life where they go from learning to read to reading to learn. And if you're behind there, you're going to be left behind, right? That each child, each student should go on to graduate high school, be career ready and post-secondary, prepared for a post-secondary schooling. That as you move on into adulthood, you should have some type of post-secondary completion and move into thriving family income. And then all of that is based on a foundation as you are moving across the continuum that you need to have a basic family income and basic family needs met, as a foundation to be successful along this pathway. So those were the 8 high-level success measures that KConnect identified. The work of KConnect to date around data has been then going in farther down to identify what are the levers of change for each of those success measures within their community that we can agree on, that are based in research, that are actionable, that have data, right? That we can agree on. And the KConnect network got to work with the data and capacity work group and the domain work groups, and our chair for our data and capacity, one of our chairs for our data and capacity work group is here today, Dr. Neil Carlson, and got to work to identify these indicators across this spectrum of across the Cradle to Career initiative. And in the end, they identified 27 indicators, these levers of change that that groups work to strategize around, think about, monitor, make sure that we are moving in the right direction, right? And for instance, just go through one of these really quickly for kindergarten readiness. Along the path, they've identified the prenatal to third grade work group for KConnect has identified that each child in Kent County should be born healthy, right? That's a good start in life, to be born healthy, right? Along the path, we should be, by 3 years old, you should be developmentally on track. That's a good place to be, to have a basis for being kindergarten ready. And there should be really good, high quality preschool opportunities, right? That's a good pathway to get to kindergarten readiness. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, so success measures and indicators. Success measures are those large community goals, right? Indicators are those levers of change, that's sort of how you get there. So I talked a little bit about this, but with our indicator selection, and you have sort of a flow chart in your packet if you are interested in how we selected indicators and how that flowed between the work groups and different things and how. But basically, it came down to 4 criteria. We wanted to make sure that each indicator had reliable data, was actionable, was based in research, and was predictable, right? Can anyone guess, or maybe you can cheat and look at the flow chart, and guess which one we felt like was the weakest criteria, other than Neil?
What do you mean? Which one of these 4 was
Yeah.
the thing that you would?
We would move forward with.
Even if you didn't have it.
I'd say the weakest is reliable data.
Bingo, right? So we identified that if something is actionable, based in research, and predictable, but right now the community doesn't have a ability to measure that, that we should move forward and figure out a way to measure that. And in the process, we may need to use some proxy measures, right? Does that make sense to everyone? So you can find KConnect's data on our data dashboard. It's publicly accessible. It is used for our work groups. It is used for our partners. They use it in their work. And it is accessible by the entire community to see how we're doing along this path from cradle to career. Each one of those success measures then is broken down by things like race and ethnicity. You can geo-map them to understand what's happening within the community, and you can see the trends that are happening and adjust to what you're interested in looking at. So the next part I really have to credit to Dr. Paul Isley, who is on the Data and Capacity Work Group. He did this about a year and a half ago at an Accountability Partner Council, and I think it really changed the way that people perceive data in a way. First of all, I want you to sort of take a look at this picture. So where is this? Rosa Parks, right? And so when you look at this picture, what can you tell? Is it's winter? It's cold. If you were going to go outside, would you be wearing shorts? You would be wearing full clothes, I don't know what you call that, with a coat, right? But is it really, really cold? Is it like negative 10 degrees? Why? How can you tell that?
Because people are outside.
People are outside and
They
enjoying.
didn't have to be there if they didn't want to be there.
They didn't, yeah, right?
The shadows, the sun's up.
So what time is it? More specifically, what time?
3, 4 o'clock.
3, 4 o'clock, right? We can get down to almost an hour on that, probably, right? The shadows are long. This pavilion's in the southwest, right? So we know we can almost use those people as like a sundial to understand what time it is, right? Right?
It's 9 in the morning, I don't think so.
What exact temperature is it? What exact time is it? What exact day? What exact month is it? Right? We could probably figure it out, right? We could probably like figure out do some research, figure out who took the picture, track them down, figure out the exact time and date. But do we really need to do that for our purposes, right? So you just gather a bunch of data from this picture, right? But you don't know everything, but you know a lot, right? So congratulate yourself, because you just used a proxy measure, right? So something to think about as we're developing measures, because proxy measures, for those that want a definition, are an indirect measure of a desired outcome which is strongly correlated with that outcome, right? And we use proxy measures all the time. And proxy measures are commonly used when direct measures for an outcome are unobservable, unavailable, and I think the third one fits the most of this, unaffordable. You can measure anything you want, but you better have big money to do it, right? And so a lot of time it's unaffordable. And so when we talk about, we were having this discussion in the back, when you talk about establishing metrics, you're also talking about there's a monetary cost to that, right? There is maintenance, there is the ability to develop the data, visualize the data, there's a cost to that. And there's some stewardship in this room to be able to say, here are the key metrics, but not to have a laundry list of everything that we want, because that's gonna cost a lot of money. Does that make sense to everyone? All right. So here's a couple of examples that are, this really comes out of the economic world, because this is Paul Isley's view of it, but some common proxies that are used in economics, right? Home ownership is a proxy for wealth. We don't always have really good view of, from an economic perspective, what people's wealth is. But for economics, they use home ownership as a proxy for wealth. If you own a home, if you rent, what type of home you own. This is one of my favorites, actually. The second one is nighttime lights as a proxy for economic activity. So a lot of times, the United States doesn't know exactly what the economic forecast, what economic activity is like in China. So they fly satellites over China, and they monitor how much light is being emanated at night as a proxy for economic activity. If there are more lights on in China, they figure there's more economic growth, right? If there's less, maybe something's up, right? The other one, I don't know what the purchasing manager's index is. I'm not real familiar with that one. But the spam and lipstick indexes are another interesting one. And so this is, if you look at sales of spam, you can, economists say that you can identify sort of the beginnings of recessions. The other one is, this is called the lipstick index. It's not all lipstick, but what it is small priced luxury items. As they go up, people feel like they can't spend a lot of money on big ticket luxury items, but maybe there's a small priced luxury item that people can spend on. So they look at that as a proxy for when a recession begins. Because there's a definition about a recession. What is it, 2 consecutive quarters? Is that what it is? Right? And so you have to go through a lot before you can call it a recession. But these are early warnings that, hey, we might be rolling into something that we can't define for another quarter or two. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. So at the last meeting, we had a really great group who convened around shared measurement and really put some great thought into the measurements that would be needed. We've also worked in the past to gather some of that information around measurement through this entire process. So what we did kind of in between the last meeting and this meeting is, this is what our offices look like. Had a lot of conversations with some of you got text messages from me, some of you got phone calls from us. This was, I think Neil came over this week to kind of go through some stuff, and he took an action shot of us. as we sort of thought through it.
You said it's straight out of a beautiful mind, and that's what I took.
Yeah. So it's a beautiful mind. So just going into this, as we sort of talk about, and we have some draft success measures here that we'll pass out in a second. Here's a couple of design principles that may not be evident by looking at the housing stability success measures. One, we need to be able to disaggregate this by race and ethnicity whenever possible, right? I think we all agree on that. We've seen the data walking into this, and we need to be able to see that in this community, right? It's really important. We need to be able to disaggregate by children and families, and of course other populations as well. But our focus has been largely on children and families. Doesn't mean that the data can't be disaggregated by other populations as well. It should be accessible by community and partners, not just siloed in systems, right? And that lived experience, and we heard this before, right? Lived experience needs to be a check on data and to go deeper in what's actually happening in our community, because data can only give you a certain view. It can't tell you what is happening to people's lives, right? And that continuous improvement on data, there should be continuous improvement on the data itself to strengthen community intelligence. So you may have to start off with proxy measures, right? But maybe we can work towards more direct measurement over time. So data sources can be improved, data quality can be improved. We can get more intelligent about what's happening in our community as time goes on. Does that make sense? All right, so we started with this, and we've seen it a couple of times today. You guys should be fairly familiar with it. This was developed in the first 12 months of the work as a housing stability spectrum. It's really housing situations where people find themselves, where everyone in this room finds themselves, where everyone in Kent County should find themselves somewhere on this spectrum, from no housing to house by choice. So as we think of a community sort of data shared measurement system around housing stability, we have to look at this entire spectrum, right? And so what came out of this, and these are, I want to emphasize that these are draft measures. There is nothing that is written in stone here. But this is what the Housing Stability Alliance measured system might look like, right? If it adopts a similar structure to KConnect with success measures and indicators. And we can sort of talk, and we will debate what are the best measures and how to do this. But I think this starts a good foundation for a discussion of how we select a handful of measures in each category that we can use as levers of change within housing stability. So to walk you through this a little bit, you'll see that the spectrum is on top. That's the work that you guys have already done to develop that. The housing situations from no housing to house by choice. This next line is a little bit of a new build, and it was kind of the Rosetta Stone for me when we figured it out, was that there needs to be a universal goal of where we're pointing our sails in the community, right? And so this universal, what we're proposing is that this universal goal would be that all Kent County residents achieve stable housing or greater, regardless of where they enter on the spectrum. That doesn't mean that one agency needs to take the relay race all the way up to stability, or the race, the person all the way up to stability. But there should maybe be a relay race within our community to make sure that every Kent County resident is able to achieve stable housing or greater, regardless of where they enter. So starting from, just as a starting point, where we believe we can get by the end of this 6 months, right, by June, is an established set of success measures for housing stability within Kent County. That's what this group is going to do and finalize, and that'll be set. That is like what KConnect had starting off, right? We also feel like where we can get is a really good set of draft indicators. They may not be finalized, they may not go through all of that criteria and be finalized, but we can sort of hand it off to the next phase of work with some really good indicators, which puts it ahead of maybe where we started. Does that make sense to everyone? All right, so starting in kind of the no housing situation, we came up with sort of, let's go over to kind of the left side. So you'll see for every one of this we have the housing situation. Obviously we talked about the universal goal. There is a goal for each area, a success measure name, and a success measure metric. One of the things that we identified at KConnect is that often people name their measure after their metric, and that tends to be a mistake. Like we just, there is something, and that's where your ability to sort of proxy measure comes into play. That there's something that you want to measure. There's a theme that you want to measure, and you have a data source that does it, but it doesn't mean that's a 100% match, right? You may swap that out at some point as you get a better data source for it, but your name is not really going to change, right? Those are the anchoring pieces in the data. So, for instance, for under no housing, the goal that we put as a draft for the community, right, as we're talking today, is that the no housing situation should be eliminated from the face of Kent County. There should be no one in Kent County that says, I don't have housing, right? And this success measure would then be named homeless prevention, right? Some possible measurement, the metric for that would be the annual homeless count, right? Based on the information that we've done a lot of looking into as well. Is that zero? Are there zero category 1, category 2 sort of coming into the system? And then looking at those indicators, those levers of change in each category, or under the no housing, it could be things like first time in the homeless system, right? The unsheltered population based on the PIC count. Coming from a place not suitable for human habitation. This is an interesting one, not necessarily interesting, but really sad. If you look at look from 2016 to 2018, the percentage of children coming from a place not suitable for human habitation in Kent County into the homeless system grew by 438%. And that's not from 2 to 10, right? That would give you a pretty high percentage change. That's from 337 children to 2008 in a 3-year period, right? Okay, so moving on, I know I have to kind of wrap this up as quickly as possible, but there's a lot here. So temporarily housed. So goal here, pretty simple. Those in need of temporary housing are immediately served. The name for this would be crisis response capacity. And we would look at potentially the number that have been turned away, waitlisted, or lost, and drive that down to 0, right? By looking at indicators such as the length of time in the shelter system, the percentage with multiple stays in the homeless system, and exits to kind of call it permanent housing or affordable or supportive housing. So the next one is soon to lose housing, right? These are the people that call and says, I have 14 days and I'm going to be homeless. I have a place right now, but in 14 days I'm going to be homeless. And so the goal here is that housing is either saved or the family is moved to a more stable situation. We could potentially call this one housing preservation, right? I don't know exactly where this data comes from, and that's okay, right? Reliable data is the weakest one at this point, right? But the number of people who are soon, looking at the number of people who are soon to lose housing, who remain in their house, or in their housing, or are moved to a higher level of stability. Indicators under that, under that could be things like foreclosure rates, evictions, and water and utility shutoffs. So now we start getting into the area that's a little harder to identify for our community, right? When you call into the system or you walk into the system, and you're no housing to soon to lose housing, that is a place where we count and we have some information on and things like that. It gets a little harder for when you get into this at risk of losing housing category. You're not quite there on the edge, but you're pretty close. And this is that the goal for this could be that at-risk households are identified and stabilized, right? And how would we do that? Through early detection. There needs to be some type of early detection, early warning system to understand who's at risk of losing housing. So that could be, as a success measure, looking at electric and water late payments. That may not cover 100% of every single household, but it covers a lot, right? And what's the first thing? What's a early warning in a house that something's going on that could put them at risk? That's being late. That's being, did I say late? Yeah, late on an electric or a water payment. And we have that data, right, in this community through DTE, through consumers. The city has fantastic data with Becky Jo Glover and her shop around water payments, late water payments, and they don't do the whole county, right? But they do. I think she said Grand Rapids plus 9 other surrounding communities with water. So we have some pretty good information of that. We could also look at, under those indicators, those level of change, delinquent taxes that the city and the county, housing discrimination cases that are coming through the Fair Housing Center, and code violations that are maybe happening at communities, or happening at, in houses. So moving on to the insecurely housed, this is really probably the area that, the affordable housing, affordable housing can be beneficial to everyone in this, but looking at this insecurely housed, this first tier down from being stably housed, and that there are affordable housing options for all insecurely housed in Kent County. We could call this affordable housing capacity. And this is really where affordable housing supply meets or exceeds demand in each price point. Right now, there's a study going on in Grand Rapids and in some sense the county as well around the housing needs assessment that's going to produce some really good baseline information about where everyone is at their price, what price points are needed, what the gap is, and what needs to be built affordable housing wise. So we could plug in that data and make sure that some of that is redone over time to understand how we're moving the marker as a community with affordable housing. So some indicators that we could look at would be lead-in housing, an environmental condition that may signal some insecurely housed conditions within the community. Public safety crime data, what's happening in neighborhoods, and domestic violence. So now we move into the stably housed, right? So stably housed, a goal for that could be that this is the minimum goal for everyone in the county, right? That everyone is stably housed, and we shouldn't shy away from that goal. It's going to be hard to get there, but we should name that, right? And so the success measure name, it gets a little easier. It got a little easier at this point to start naming success measures because it's what it is, stably housed, right? And that is the percentage of Kent County residents that are paying less than 30% for housing costs. That's a pretty standard when you look nationally metric that people are using that's measured by the American Community Survey and the census to understand when you start getting above that point, you start dipping into not being stably housed. So things that we may want to keep track of, right? Those indicators to understand what's the difference. How are home prices going up versus wages, right? What is happening with credit scores and debt to income ratios? And the employment rate. So looking at housed by choice. So housed by choice should be the goal, is the goal for every Kent County resident. We have the minimum goal and we have the goal, right? We want everyone to be housed by choice. And a proxy, right, we should, for this, could be home ownership, right? And home ownership is about, as we saw in the economic side of it, right, it's about wealth creation. And as Paul Isley, the economist on our team, often says, wealth is about taking a punch and keeping on, and your ability to keep moving, right? And so what we see, I think a lot, is that because of a huge disparity in wealth, there are certain people, but definitely populations, that can't take that punch without being left on the street. So indicators of that could be high density buildings with home ownership opportunities. I don't know if we have the space or the having some conversations with some folks at the city that are doing some work, have the space for everyone to have a single home, but maybe there's high density buildings that you could own in and build wealth at the same time. That the housing supply is greater than or equals demand, and that there's some foundation, some looking at equitable lending practices. We know those are not equal across the boards. We know that there are areas of the city that get less funding, and it just happens to be in neighborhoods that have high proportions of people of color, right? And we know that banks aren't supposed to redline anymore, but there may not be the same type of protection that exists for credit unions, right? And that stuff that still goes on, that the investment doesn't happen where you need it, or the people that get the investment in the area of need may not be the people that need it, right? Okay. I'm getting they're giving me the big cane. They actually invested in one of those for me. But yeah.
Since we're, I think, economizing,
Yeah.
right? You want everyone to brainstorm what other things they might suggest as indicators. And I just want to point out, for KConnect, a lot of these were given by organizations with clinical interest and availability in particular indicators. And one of the questions here is, if we don't have that, then who's going to take a clinical interest in not just the aggregate that we want to look at as a system, but the retail intervention work on any one of these things? And that may answer questions about what the shift in the indicator should be. Who's got the clinical interest in this space?
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I don't know what you mean by clinical.
Oh, I'm sorry. So the difference between, like in psychology, my colleague Laura is a social psychologist. She looks at all of our psychology. But the clinical psychologist is a therapist who sits down with you and works on your issues. So in social work, you have clinical social workers who are trying to solve individual problems.
So like
and macro
program.
social workers,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
But in any case where all you know is what we're going to do with the aggregate, and you don't know who's going to work on the individual level,
Okay.
then we need to answer that question.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the thing that I would remind is, as Neil said, I think termed it sort of brainstorm additional indicators. the thing that I would think about, and so we use this sort of discipline on purpose, so that we have approximately 3 indicators per success measure that we can strategize around, right? You could probably come up with indicators until the cows came home that would be as long as this list. There's a couple of things that would be problematic. You wouldn't know where to focus your efforts, convene strategy around, and 2, there's a cost to this. Every indicator that you're adding to is a cost that needs to be visualized, that needs to be maintained, that needs to be built, right? So it's something to think about as being stewards of kind of this future state, that this helps give direction, this helps anchor us, but there is a cost for everything that you would like to add to that. So just something to think about as we're doing it. There's also something that these indicators are not set in stone. You may work on an indicator and get it going in the right direction and get it to where you want it to go, and then you say, hey, what was that 4th kind of indicator that we were kicking around? Let's bring that one online and transition that old indicator out so that we have a new area to sort of work on. All right.
All right. Are we ready? Thank you, Mark. So we are going to take approximately, thank you very much. We're going to take approximately 7 minutes for this activity of brainstorming. So it's not going to look like it looks in your packet. I just want you to partner up with somebody. So you're just going to pair up with the person next to you. And the exercise, look, you've already started. That's what that laugh is for. And the exercise is essentially this. Look at the dashboard, essentially, that Mark has prepared for us. Use that as a foundational tool, and then brainstorm ways that you would improve it, right? It could be maybe this goal might be suggested to be a different name, or maybe you might think, oh, there might be another indicator that you would prioritize over one of the 3 indicators that are already there. So just partner up with the person that's next to you and do that. It's a time-bound activity, and we're going to collect all of your feedback. So whatever suggestions or improvements you have, document 1 per Post-it note, and then just stick your Post-it notes on the flip chart paper that's at your table, okay? So you're brainstorming suggestions for improving upon this foundational tool for measures, 1 idea per Post-it note, and just stick them on the table. And then afterwards, we're going to collect those, and then I'll tell you what will happen to them when I come back to you. All right, 7 minutes. You will have more opportunity in the future, I promise you. This is not over. It is just right in the middle. I can't say it's just beginning because it began with you last week, or not last week, last month. So just in a 2-minute span, just want to get your reactions to this whole data piece, right? Now that we're on the second wave or second evolution of it with the dashboard, and now that you've had the opportunity to do a little bit deeper reflection and interaction about it, just what are your thoughts that are bubbling up, if any? Oh, yes.
Well, having been in the work group last month on metrics and feeling like we were all over the place.
Uh-huh.
I don't want to speak for my peers who were in that group with me.
Speak for me.
I'm really impressed how you were able to take kind of all of those thoughts and ideas and feedback and create such a thoughtful process with both objectives and indicators. So I'm impressed with this.
Yes.
So thank you for your work on it. Everyone who was involved, because I know a lot of people were called and that there was a lot of conversation that happened between the last meeting and this meeting. So I just want to give my thanks to that. The question I pose, and I turn to my friend here, Commissioner Talon, because I know he has experience in this. I'd really like to know more and take a deeper dive in the HMIS data and the data that is currently available and how that's currently being utilized and shared, and how we can potentially use that in in a different way and have it drive improvements in the system, identify problems with the system, but kind of
Gotcha.
elevate it beyond just make it more, I don't know the right word for it, really have it be
Yes.
driven and utilized as a community, not just for the agencies that are inputting
Gotcha.
the data.
Sounds good. Thank you. And thank Mark for all of his leadership behind the scenes with this. It really is his baby brainchild. Okay, we have time for one more comment. You guys have to pick which one of you wants to go, or did one of you want to go? Okay. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that because this work is pointed at children and families, that we think about children as a way to think about prevention and early indicators for things like this.
Yes. All right. Think about children.
Rather than this is terrific work, but it feels like it's around grown folks.
All right.
So how are children faring? Would
Okay.
probably tell us where some of these early indicators are.
Yes. Okay. So make sure we look at the lens. So.
Children indicators in it too, but I'm really excited about it. I think it's exciting to have an idea of the scope and
Yeah.
and then I'm getting to leverage activities, how do people can.
Gotcha. Excellent. So some of the indicators definitely point to children. All right. So with that, we now get into forming some action teams. Remember, I told you like we were creating a sense of urgency because there's some work to get done in order for those green things to get to orange, or the gray to get to green to get to orange. So in order to get that done, if you will pull out in your packet this document that says action teams. Action teams, action teams. Action teams. Okay. And your page is turning over here. Action teams. I feel like I'm in church, right? Where you like turn to Leviticus chapter 2, and then you hear all the pages shuffling, and you're like, okay, don't read until you stop hearing the pages shuffle. So, okay, the pages have stopped shuffling, so now I can give my sermon. All right, no. So with that, so the action teams, we're going to form some action teams in order to get the work done, which means this is where your experience, wisdom, participation is absolutely critical for us to advance movement towards June 30th and completing the common agenda and roadmap, which is the plan, which you read the summary of earlier, and we're just kind of completing the elements that need to be completed. So the action teams represent a subset of some of the core work that still needs to be done. One action team is around core strategies. Some of you, it was either design team or the content team or the scout team, or maybe a combination of all of you, already did a lot of phenomenal work. I loved it. I call it like a lot of rich development in terms of content as it related to identifying those systemic root causes, the vision statements, and the potential strategies that you read on the summary that we reviewed earlier in the day. There still needs to be another look at that. She's telling me the microphone. Are you telling me the microphone? Oh, okay, it's right here. Okay. Yeah, there still needs to be another look at that, obviously through the lens of lived experience, but there may be other community perspectives that are not represented by this particular body that may also need to come into play in order to have a really nice comprehensive plan, so that when you use the word community, it really is reflective of the community. So it's representative of the voices of the community. So we want to form an action team that can take those core strategies, review them with people with lived experience. So it'd be a great place for Urban League and Hispanic Center also to get involved, and some of you to identify those community perspectives that are missing, review the strategies through those lenses with those groups of people, and then come back and recommend enhancements to the strategies to the larger group. We will also, based on the conversation earlier today where we were documenting these questions, some of these questions can get integrated into the strategy because some of them will lead to new strategies. So we want you to take the list of questions generated today, think about those through a strategic lens for the Housing Stability Alliance. What action orientation might those strategies lead to? Incorporate that into strategy development. Come back April 23rd, which is 2 meetings from now, and report to the group. Here's kind of what we recommend. You have some starter material that will be available for you on Trello. It basically is the work, the detailed work of the Common Agenda and Roadmap overview that you had. That has a lot of promising practices, so best practice research is in there, some of the scout team work is in there, and again, a lot of more detail that will be available to you. So that's one group. The second group is for people who love language, right? And I know there has to be some language lovers in here, and you're really interested in how you convey meaning. And meaning is essential for understanding. And so it's really, it says glossary of terms, we should probably say facilitation of meaning and understanding. So within this framework that we're operating in, within the collective impact agenda, there's already a list of terms like backbone and some other technical terms that have been identified that we need somebody's to form an action team around to say, take this list. There's some additional terms that have arisen from last meeting and this meeting that probably need to be integrated into, and probably some broader terms that are related to this work that would be helpful for us to have a shared understanding with, so that when we say data, for example, we know we don't only mean just the quantitative numeric pieces that we can see, touch, and measure, but we also mean the qualitative pieces, right? The storytelling, the lived experiences that we might not be able to see, touch, and measure, but we can feel, impact, and still make good decisions on. Make sense? So we need a group on glossary of terms or coming to meaning. A third group is going to be around system map. So in the January meeting, there was a group that started the process of brainstorming the content of what the system map could look like. The intent of the system map, again, it's what's the one picture, although we can have many pictures, but what's the one picture that can tell the most compelling story, that if we can put it on one piece of paper, make the system visible, that we can inspire the most people in the community to take action on this issue of housing stability, right? Either to decrease homelessness and increase housing stability, or eliminate homelessness according to that map, right? And then increase housing stability. So what needs to be on that? There were some key questions that came up in that first meeting, like what terms do we want to use or how do we want to present it? Anyway, so Mark, I think, will be the person that'll actually produce the map, but we need a group that will work with him or actually to refine that content, make sure that it's reflective of something that's usable, tangible, and could really ignite and inspire engagement from a phenomenal amount of people so that people can say, yes, I want to get involved in this movement. Make sense? System map. All right, now the fourth group is around shared measurement. And then the shared measurement group will take all of your input from today, take the framework that Mark has provided for us. We'll work with Mark to refine this framework. That framework then for the success measures will go to the KConnect Data and Capacity Group. The Data and Capacity Group is a countywide group of data scientists or experts who can then advise us on like what really is going to be a good set of I don't know what you call it. I guess a good set of working measures that we could utilize, and then they're going to give their input to it to shape it, and then that group then will come back and present back to us on March 26th. I don't know when that meeting is, but Mark will be able to facilitate that piece. So that's that group, but it's really taking all this input, working with Mark to refine it, and then getting the input of the KConnect Data and Capacity Work Group to make sure that that work gets elevated. And then the fifth and the final action team that we need is around KConnect, and that's sadly so, the KConnect backbone team is kind of transitioning out of the space in housing and going back to their home in education June 30th. And there needs to be an entity, a backbone entity to hand off to on June 30th. And so definitely it has to be a priority over the next several weeks to identify or to define what the governance structure will look like for the backbone entity that will step into the place that KConnect is now presently filling. And then not only that, but I think it's also to define a selection criteria or selection process by which that backbone entity can be identified. So we need a group of people who are willing to work with KConnect staff in order to make that happen, or at least to design that process and to kind of speak into it, to shape it, definitely under KConnect's leadership or in partnership with KConnect leadership. So those are the 5 action teams. So again, we need you to commit to an action team. And we want to have the action teams as balanced as possible in terms of numeric participation. So in the last meeting, I think we let everybody go where they wanted to go, and you can still go where you want to go. But the shared measurement group, I think, had like 3 times as many people as purpose, name and purpose. Well, today, if you can kind of self-govern and, you know, hopefully you have 2 or 3 areas that you might be interested in. And if you see like one area you're interested in, if the group is kind of full, you might float to another group. So what we're going to do is we're going to break up into these action teams right now so that we can at least know who's interested in what and collect your information. Deanna Rolfe, who's back there, if you don't know her, she's going to be coordinating and managing, or be your KConnect point of contact, if you will, between now and the next couple of meetings, on making sure that at least if you have any questions about what you're supposed to be doing, she'll be your point of contact in order to facilitate workflow and work output. Any questions before we break up into your action teams real quick? So we're just forming so we know who's who.
Yeah, just really quick sec. So when we talk about core strategies, that's really just a term. We're really naming that high leverage activity.
The high leverage activity.
So just hopefully not confuse people if there's 2 different.
Yeah.
We'll clean that up. But that,
We'll clean.
that is a high leverage activity.
Yep. All right. So core strategies, Deanna is going to represent you, and you're going to be right back over here in this corner. So Deanna, can you? So, and when you move right now, just move with your cell phone or whatever device it is that has your calendar on it, so that you can like at least give your name and maybe give some ideas on when you might be available, but you can leave the rest of your stuff at your table. So core strategies, we're going to give you right in this corner. Glossary of terms, you'll be right up here in this corner.
No glossary of terms.
Yeah, no, glossary of terms. Come on, meeting. Who likes meeting?
Taxonomy.
Oh, taxonomy. Taxonomy. System map, Neil, where you stand? System map people, we're going to put you right here. You'll be with Neil for a second. Shared measurement, you're with Mark. You'll be over there in that corner. And then Pam, backbone entity, is going to be back over there in that corner. All right, so you're just forming to know who's in your group, exchange contact information, figure out when your first meeting is going to be. You will have 7 minutes, and then we will be back. It's just hi. All right.